may be seated this morning. Good morning, Crossing. As you heard earlier, my name is Efren, and I'm the youth pastor over at First Christian. And I get to be with you guys here this morning with this great youth band. Didn't they do a great job so far? Yes, there's more to come from them later. And we're just grateful that you guys are able to be a part of this, as we've been able to give the teens an opportunity to lead worship and just really use their talents and their skills for the Lord this morning. So we're really glad to have these kinds of opportunities. Now this morning, as we continue on, we are wrapping up our series called Our Imperfect Family. In the last 2 weeks, we talked about some characteristics and some things that we should strive for within our family, like being able to find peace within our family and trying to keep our families inseparable. And this morning, what we would like to do is to kind of wrap up today of maybe what's going to be the root of like family success, and how even though our families may be imperfect, the things that we can do to really keep them together and just have the foundation for our family so we can have success for our future. And as we talk about this idea of like family success real quick, I mean, I know we all have our own ideas of success. Maybe we have our own things that we're chasing after for success, and we have our own version of it. And some of it, depending on what we're looking for, we may be passing down certain skills, maybe certain knowledge, maybe certain skill sets that we are trying to pass on, to our kids or maybe the grandkids. And this is what we're trying to do to really even set them up for success for the future. And this concept of passing on something in our families, I mean, it's been around forever. Us as humans, we do this. We like to pass on whatever we have, what we feel can be useful to the next generation so they can be set up for success in the future. And we try to do this because I think deep down we all know none of us are going to live forever, right? Like, we're not. At some point, we're going to die. And we want to pass on something that's going to leave a true lasting legacy for our kids, and something that's going to live beyond us for years and years. So we have this idea that we want to continue to do. And this morning, I want to talk about this plate here. And this, I don't know if you can actually like zoom in. There's a bad glare. But either way, this is a recipe that was put on this plate for Katie's grandfather's rum cake. And this cake is delicious, which I know for some of you are thinking, the fluffy guy thinks it's delicious. What a shock. But he was famous for these rum cakes in the town that he was at in Elizabethton, Tennessee. He was famous for these, and he would make these all the time, and he would pass them out to people. He would take them to people's homes, and everyone knew about Willie's rum cakes, or as the family calls, Papa's rum cakes. And this is something that he ended up passing away, unfortunately, this past December. He ended up passing away, and then so this was something that was made to commemorate something famous that he had. And it was something that everyone had. So now we have this plate. We now have this great recipe. So Katie, because let's just be honest, I have no baking skills. So Katie can bake for us and maybe for others. And yes, I have to put her on the spot because, again, baking is not my strong suit. But that is something that was passed down and that will continue to be passed down as Papa's recipe. And this is something that we're very excited to have, and we're glad that we have it, and we're glad that a family member made this for us. And this is something that will continue on beyond his years. And maybe right now you're thinking already of things that you want to pass down to your kids or grandkids, or maybe what has been passed down to you. Or maybe, honestly, because of all this, you're just thinking of cake, and you're just thinking, like, that sounds really good, which I understand. I set you up for that. But we have, maybe you're thinking of these things, but something I want us to start thinking about is, are those the kinds of things, is that all we really want to pass down? Or do we really just want to pass down whatever knowledge we've had and whatever material possessions or maybe just a certain skill set? Like, is that all? I'm not saying those things are bad. I mean, those things are good. This is how society, humanity works. But is that all we want to pass down? And there's some things that I think about is, if we're here and you're a Christian this morning and you're thinking about things, I think that probably majority of Christian parents and grandparents, we probably really all want the same thing passed down if we really start to think about it. Because when we look at things, yes, we may have different, again, skill sets, possessions. But as believers, I think deep down, we all want the same thing. And so what we're going to be doing, we're going to be spending a good amount of time in Deuteronomy chapter 6. And this is where we're going to start off. And we're going to try to dig into what this chapter is telling us to see is what is the real thing that we can pass down that will just last really forever. So we're going to start in chapter 6, verse 1. This is the command, the statutes and ordinances the Lord your God has commanded me to teach you, so that you may follow them in the land that you are about to enter and possess. Do this so you may fear the Lord your God all the days of your life, by keeping all of the statutes and commands I am giving you, and to your son and your grandson, and so that you may have a long life. So, quick little context here. If you go back into Deuteronomy chapter 5, Moses is speaking to the people, getting them ready to take over the land that was promised to them, and telling them here are all the laws and everything that God has set forth for proper living for his people. And in chapter 5, he reiterates the 10 commandments, and on some of the commandments, he gives a little bit more in-depth look into what some of those commandments mean and how to live them out. And he is giving them this, and then as we roll into chapter 6, he reminds them, right, these are the commands, these are the statutes, this is what we want you to teach. And then what I end up seeing here is what he says here, like, this is for you first. And I found that interesting that he said, this is for you, then your son and your sons. You see, if we're going to actually be able to pass something down, it has to start with us. I mean, think about it as like what you hear. If you've flown, which I'm sure maybe most people here, if you have flown when you're starting to take off for the, to start the flight, and the stewardess or steward is up there and they're telling you all the safety precautions and stuff, and they say, hey, if this oxygen thingy falls down, what are you supposed to do first? Put it on yourself, right? And then you put it on your kids, because you're no good to your kids dead. I mean, let's just be honest about it. Like, we got to make sure we have oxygen flowing, make sure we can breathe properly, and then we can give it to our children and to our dependents that are with us. So this is the same kind of idea that Moses is trying to say, like, listen, this is first for you. First and foremost, these commands are for you. And that's what we need to understand. And he says this first command is to fear the Lord our God all the days of our life. Like, first and foremost, we, as a believer, we have to start with the fear of God. Now, sometimes this idea of fearing God, sometimes people say, and I'm not saying they're completely wrong, but sometimes they say, well, this is just really about reverence. It's not really about fear. But when I look at Scripture and I see people like Isaiah, when they become in the presence of God, he is completely frightened. He falls to the floor and he's just like, I am a sinner. I'm a man of unclean lips. Like, he is truly afraid of being in the presence of God because he knows who he is, a sinner. He knows his holy and mighty Creator God. And he's like, I shouldn't even be in the same presence as you. Surely I'm going to have to die because you are holy and I am not. So he has this true fear. I mean, we even see this as well with like the shepherds when the angels came. These are just angels and they were completely terrified. When you get in something that's holy, and it just frightens us, and we have to start with that fear first. And we learn to fear him because of this promise that he says, so you can live long, to have long days. This is what it starts with. Now, I know this may seem a little counterintuitive, because we know, like, if we're living in constant fear, we have stress, we have anxiety, and that can cause, like, real physical problems. So how in the world could God actually say, like, you need to fear me, like, actually be afraid, but still say you're going to live a long time? Because it seems like it doesn't work together. Well, I think in Proverbs chapter 9, and this is where we get to start a little bit. Proverbs chapter 9, verse 10. Here's what he says. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. So here we have, again, talking about the fear of God and saying, listen, we need to fear God first. Then you start gaining knowledge. Then we start gaining wisdom, understanding. Because the thing is, once we truly start to fear God ourselves, that's when we really learn that we actually have nothing to fear. If we truly fear him, then we can also start to learn and we start to think in a different way of, okay, I fear him, I want to serve him, but then you realize you don't come under his judgment or wrath because we already fear him. We are his already. We are his children. So there's really nothing to fear, and there's nothing that can touch us. And this is why we see all throughout Scripture constantly words like fear not, do not be afraid, do not be discouraged. And he's telling these to people that love him and just say, and he's like, listen, I know you fearing, that's right, but you really don't have anything to fear. And so when we understand that kind of concept, we start to see that, it starts with fear, but that's not the only response to God that we're supposed to have. There is a second part that this fear is supposed to lead to for us. And we see this going back to Deuteronomy chapter 6. Now we're going to be in verse 4. It says, listen, Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. So I actually love how this starts off here. Like God says, hear, O Israel. Like, Israel, pay attention. God is speaking. Focus here. What I'm about to say next is really important. And then he says, I am the Lord your God, and I am one. So we're seeing this communication that God's like, listen, pay attention to me. But as God, let me tell you right now, I am the only one. I am the ultimate, the only God that is out there. We have this command that is coming for exclusive and total devotion to God. And then he says we are to love him with all our, and the first thing he says is heart. Now he starts with heart, and I believe he starts with loving God with all our heart first, because that's where it also needs to start. We're going to be in Luke chapter 6 real quick. Listen to the words of Jesus to tie into this. Luke chapter 6, verse 43. A good tree does not produce bad fruit. On the other hand, a bad tree doesn't produce good fruit. A good person produces good out of the good stored up in his heart. An evil person produces evil out of the evil stored up in his heart. For his mouth speaks from the overflow of the heart. So this is why God says, love him first with our heart. Because whatever we put in there, that is what is going to come out. This is why Jesus says, whatever is stored up, that's what's going to come out. And then you can see what kind of person that you are, or that we are. People are going to be able to see that. So our hearts truly are probably one of our most important possessions that we have, because everything about who we are comes out of there. And whatever we allow in is what's going to come out. This is why I believe that God says at first it starts with loving him with all of our hearts. And the thing is, when this love for God consumes our heart, that is what's going to come out, is the love of God for people everywhere to see. I believe this is why as well in Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23, briefly it says, guard your heart above all else, for everything you do flows from it. It starts there. We have to have a fear of God, but we have to let God actually consume our hearts first. Because if we're able to do that, then that's what is going to be coming out. People are going to see it, and people are going to know it. And man, when people, like, you're probably already thinking of someone in your mind who's like, man, I know for a fact that they love the Lord. Because you see how they love people. You see how they interact. You see the things that they do. And you see this because it starts with their heart first. And then when they love God with their heart, then we see that they're loving him with their soul. Now our soul, like our very being, the core of who we are is to love God. Like it should just be ingrained in our DNA. We need to let him completely take over our personalities, our characteristics. Because when it comes down to it, God created us to love him. And we are to be all consumed by him. So this actually should come a little more naturally. And so therefore, our thoughts, our goals, our desires, our plans all end up turning around and being, God, I just want to continue to serve you. Like, what do you want me to do, Lord? I want to bring you honor. I want to bring you glory. And then, like I said, our very being just gets consumed. And then what naturally happens is this next point is loving God with all our might. Like literal might, like our strength, like our physical, what we have, our muscles, everything. We're saying, Lord, I love you so much. Use everything. You need my feet to go somewhere? I will go. You need me to lift some tables? I mean, I don't know, like anything. Just everything, God. I'm going to just continue to just, everything I have, Lord. Use everything you have given me to continue to serve you. I'm going to give you my very best, and I will be relentless, Lord, in giving you everything I have. So we see that God puts this in order because it does start with fearing him, and then we have to love him with our heart and let the heart continue into our soul. And then once our heart and soul are all in, our bodies are all in too. And we're giving God everything that we have. And then we start to see that our desires, our goals, our thoughts become his. And we start to think, man, how can I continue to expand his kingdom? How can I continue to show people how to love him? How can I just continue this process? Like, I want this to just keep moving because God has done so much for me, and I just want him to continue to use me. You know, I want other people to feel the same way, and it just ends up being this trickle effect that we start to just pass on to constant people over and over. And then what we see, though, is that as we say in verse 2, this is for you, but we also see it doesn't stop at just us. There is this passing on that is supposed to happen. He says, this is for your sons, for your sons' sons. Maybe he could have added for your sons' sons' sons, but I don't know how that would have worked grammatically, so there you go. But the idea is still there. To continue to pass on, and maybe at this point, you're starting to think a little bit, well, I don't have kids yet, or maybe I don't have kids in the home, or maybe there's just, I don't really have that kind of influence around me. And so what I want to encourage you as we continue through this passage, please don't start to check out a little bit, because it's like, well, maybe one day, there are plenty of kids right now who have zero godly influence in our community, and it could be us. There are kids that literally, in that ministry across the hall that could use an extra godly influence. There are kids at the Y. You could volunteer somehow, or at the Boys and Girls Club, or maybe big brothers, big sisters. There are kids who need godly influences in life. So maybe you don't have kids directly in your life or grandkids, but you can find some kids to pass on the love and knowledge of Christ somewhere. We all can. And so as we continue on through this, I hope we can kind of digest what is being taught to us here, because there are plenty of people we can pass on this love of God to. So let's look starting in verse 6. These words that I am giving you today are to be in your heart. There it is again. Starting with the heart. There it is. Let's go on. Repeat them to your children. Talk about them when you sit in your house, when you walk along the road, when you lie down, when you get up. Bind them as a sign on your hand. Let them be a symbol on your forehead. Write them on the doorpost of your house and on your city gates. So we see here this command again, keep it on your heart, but then turn around and teach it. Teach it to the kids. And then you see how he gives these examples on how we can do that. When you wake up. Maybe when you wake up, you just say, kids, isn't it a great morning that God has given us another day? Look how beautiful it is outside. I don't care if it's freezing rain. We're alive. It's a beautiful day. And God gave it to us. Or maybe as you're getting the kids ready for school or practice, or maybe come to church, man, be open. Let them talk about things. Let them ask questions. Take those opportunities to just talk about God and his love for them and the stories that he has. Or maybe, when you go down to bed, yes, you have your books, but one thing that we found has been good is like the Jesus Calling Bible for kids. Man, that's actually a great resource. It condenses the Bible stories in ways that kids can understand, and then it has, at the end, it has like a passage of scripture, and then Jesus speaking to the kids, and you can get them really start thinking, and you can also have them go to bed with God's words on their hearts. Just having this open communication constantly about God, and just saying I want to continue to teach you. Or that second portion, wear God's word, the apparel. Now, I know first, okay, listen, I get it. Sometimes we look at Christian apparel and we're like, they are hideous. That is cheesy. Really? My 5-year-old could have colored that better. I get it. Some of it's really bad. So listen, a quick little plea. If you have great design talent, please make us some great Christian t-shirts and hats. Please do so. There are some good ones out there, though. I know I'm generalizing, but it's this idea of having it on you. And don't think of it as, because I know some people have said before, I don't like Christian apparel because it's lazy evangelism. It's not, you're not using the t-shirt to evangelize, you're using the t-shirt or the hat or the bracelet, like the old WWJD bracelets. Anybody remember those? But you wear those things for you. to remind us every day about the words of God, to remind us, what would Jesus do in this situation? That's what it's for, and that's what we want to do. And that's what he says here. It's like, do that so you can constantly be reminded and let it be conversation starters. You know, and put the word of God everywhere in your house. Like, for instance, we have this, like this frame. It just says, I'm sure y'all can't see it, so my apologies, but here I am, send me, from Isaiah. Where Isaiah, after he has his encounter with God, that's what he says. Because God says, who am I going to send? He's like, I'm right here. That's a man who loved God with all his heart, soul, and might, by the way, because he was ready to go. But put stuff like this up, and you may be thinking, well, that's how my grandma's house looked like. So be it. Have a grandma's house. That's fine. You know, because we see here, put the word up all over the place so you can see it, so you can read it, so you can be encouraged, so your kids can be encouraged. If your kids can't read it to them. Explain what it means. I mean, even when people come to our house, you know, they can look at it and be like, what's that about? Hey, well, this comes from this verse. Let me explain it to you. Just these constant opportunities to just pass the word down, and we are to do these consistently. Reminders all throughout the day, every single day, of the God that we serve and the God that we love. Let the kids see it. Let them talk about it. Let them ask questions, all the questions that they need. You know, sometimes they may hit you with the hard question. Like we got hit a few days ago with how can God always exist from a 9-year-old? I can barely explain it myself. I can barely explain it to adults. How am I going to make a 9-year-old believe this? But they'll hit you with it. Do the best you can. Just let them have the open opportunity to ask those questions. Because look, here's the thing. 100 years from now, 200 years from now, what college they went to, what their GPA was, what sport they played, none of that's going to matter. There's one thing that's going to matter is our kids, our grandkids, the people we love, are they in the presence of the holy God for all eternity? That's all that's going to matter. So, this is why this is so important and why this command is given to continue to pass on the faith. We want as many people, and of course, as many people we love in heaven with us. And I know this may seem like a lot. This may seem like a tall order, like, man, how can we continue this? And, you know, kids, they make their own decisions. They may stray. Like, this is, like, how do we know it's actually going to work out? Or Proverbs chapter 26 gives us a promise, or chapter 22, verse 6, gives us a promise from God. It says, start a youth out on his way. Even when he grows old, he will not depart from it. Now, what's funny about this passage is, I used to think all the time that it said, raise them in the way they should go, and he will not easily depart from it. But then, you know, a few years ago, I went back and I was reading through, and I realized, wait a second, it doesn't say not easily. There's actually not a whole lot of wiggle room. I see a promise there that says, when they're older, they will not depart from it. Now, understand, what it doesn't say is that people aren't going to have a hard time. It doesn't say there won't be a season of life where they may be questioning all this and wondering, is God worth it? For me, growing up, I am a second-generation Christian. My parents became Christians because of missionaries that came to Puerto Rico, and those missionaries converted my parents. And so, of course, after that, my parents both, they're just like, man, we really want to make sure our kids don't live the life we did and didn't have the knowledge of Jesus for as long as we did. So we want to make sure we raise them in this way. And they did. They constantly talked to us about God. You know, the stuff that we're kind of talking about, my parents did all these things. But, you know, I still had a season of life where I truly did wonder, is this God stuff even real? Listen, there was a season of life that was very BC Ephraim, that is before Christ, in case you didn't know. I did. I questioned the point of church. I questioned, you know, is this God stuff even worth it, or is it even real? There's a lot of things I did that I wasn't proud of, and I know my parents weren't proud of. But the thing is, they had set the foundation in me. So, as that promise said, when I get older, I didn't depart. I still came back. So if you have a loved one in your life right now that is maybe in that season, I encourage you, continue to pray for them, continue to be there in their life, continue to love them, because God made us a promise they will come back. If the foundation was set, they will come back. Maybe not in our timing, but God knows when that will happen. And this is the promise that we can hold on to, because when God makes a promise, it is the promise that we know he will keep. He's the only one that doesn't break his promises. So he gives us this command to just fear God ourselves and love him with everything that we have, and pass that love, pass that fear on to everyone else. And that's really the most important thing we can pass on. And then he promises they won't depart. And see, if we want true success, if we want, just that idea of success, we really want that idea of having inseparable families and as much peace as possible. And this is where it needs to start. It has to start with us first. And then we have to continue to pass that down. Because understand something, we can't pass down something that we don't have. So that's why it starts with us. And then we continue to pass it down. Now, I started off and I told you about this rum cake. And yes, I'm back to the cake. And but we started off with this, and I told you a little bit about it, but I actually didn't tell you the whole story. You see, this rum cake, when Papa would make it and he would pass it out to everyone, there was a lot more love and care and devotion behind those cakes. And what I want to do is actually read for you a post that was put up by, to us strangers, but about an encounter they had with Papa. And she found out that he had passed away, so this is what she put on Facebook, because what happened was is they had gotten in a car accident together. And everybody ended up being okay. The cars not so much, but better the car than the people. And what happened, everyone knew about the car accident, but what we didn't know was this part. It says, a few days after that wreck, someone rang our doorbell. And it was the man and his wife. They made a trip to our house to apologize to us again for the accident, something that they most certainly did not have to do. Not only did he offer their sincere apologies, but he brought us one of his famous rum cakes. His wife brought our son a small Christmas tree that she had crafted to look like a snowman. As we stood in our living room, talking and assuring them that we had no ill feelings toward them or the accident, the conversation eventually turned into small talk. It didn't take long for him to ask if we had a church home, and he quickly offered us a seat at their church. We told him that we had a church home, but thanked him for the invitation. By the end of the conversation, we knew of their home on the river, and had a standing invitation to come sit on their porch swing. Today, I thought of this sweet couple and how God used that situation for his good. This man of God used a car accident to reach out to a stranger about the Lord. Can we all say that we take less than desirable circumstances or chance meetings with strangers to talk about God? I know I can't. But I highly doubt that was the first time this gentleman had struck up a conversation like that, and I'm sure that he was welcomed into heaven with loving arms. I hope to be more like that and to use the places God puts me to glorify him. See, he used a car accident because he was so consumed with God himself that this was an opportunity for him to reach out to strangers he didn't know, and part of it to make it maybe a little less awkward or maybe not so hard to have this conversation, he brings one of his rum cakes. Because let's be honest, cake can diffuse a whole lot of weirdness. So that's what he ends up using is this skill of baking delicious rum cakes to talk to people about God, to invite them to his church, to make sure that they know who God is, because he wasn't going to meet someone and not pass up the opportunity to not tell them about his love for his Lord. So when, again, Katie makes these rum cakes, and when we see this plate, it's more than just the cake that he passed on. We see what he truly is passing on to us and what we're actually going to remember about this recipe and about what that man of God did with his skills and talents. He couldn't hold together this love for God. He had to share it any way he can, and this was one way that he did it. And that is what he has passing on. That is this man's legacy that would live far beyond his years. So the question that I want to leave us with this morning is, what are we going to pass on?